Okay, Josh Barnett, Bloodsport comes to London this Sunday at the Electric Ballroom. Very happy to be joined today by the man whose name is on the poster, the former and youngest UFC heavyweight champion of all time, King of Pancrase, Pride Grand Prix finalist, Strikeforce Grand Prix finalist, the baby-faced assassin, the Warmaster, Josh Barnett. Josh, how are you doing? I guess it's a very busy week ahead.
It is, and it went from being 74 degrees Fahrenheit in maybe 30 minutes, half hour, 45 minutes to over 88. So it's just, yeah, I was laughing when the UK was going on about their heat wave. I'm like, that's just normal for us. That doesn't sound that
Yeah.
punishing.
Well, you gotta understand, it gets very humid here. It gets very humid. But I mean, I've been
Yeah,
out to California before, and like, yeah, it's hot. It's hot.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And especially
Yeah,
you get the humidity when you're closer to the ocean, but then as you move further inland, the humidity drops, but the heat just climbs like nobody's business. I mean, Death Valley, part of it, I believe, is in California. Yeah.
yeah. It's not doing a great job of preparing you for the UK then.
No, but I'm from the Pacific Northwest, so for me,
Yeah,
gray, dark, cold, I'm fine with it, especially if I get to trounce around in like 18th and 19th century buildings, even just to get my coffee in the morning, or even to go to a little spot to hang out and grab food. I couldn't give two shits. I love it. It fits the architecture fits the weather. I love the architecture. The weather doesn't bug me too much. Oh, the rain can get a little bit oppressive. However, it just gives you more reason to be inside those cool buildings.
yeah. I mean, obviously the rain you're used to from Seattle, so yeah. I mean, yeah. I've been California, Vegas, Florida. I'm not used to heat there. I've got family up in Seattle, so I've been up there, no problems.
Yeah, Florida. Now that's a heat I have no interest in dealing with because
Yeah,
I mean I remember being there one time and it was 8 o'clock in the morning and already over 80 degrees and like 80% humidity, and I had to go outside and do like an outdoor interview segment for Bellator on a beach because I had a fighter competing in their organization, and as the coach they wanted to talk to me. Oh my god, brutal. No, no thanks.
um, yeah. So obviously, how soon are you heading down to the UK? How long are you gonna be spending over here? Because I think you've got a seminar booked as well. Am I correct?
I do, and I'm going to post up my seminar tour schedule here today. I'll probably do it after this interview. But I've got quite a few seminars, and the thing is, um, and I don't know if people have actually picked up on this, although I don't really blame them because it can be hard to really get a lot of reach, no matter how many followers you have, and the fact that social media is, people might follow your content or even be interested in the subject. Getting seen is it's it's some sort of weird voodoo these days.
Mm.
And personally, nobody wants to see my butt cheeks enough to bother to use that as any kind of bait to bring them in. However, as we've been doing over the last couple of years, we're bringing a team from America as the ACWA, American Catch Wrestling Association, to compete in the Snake Pit World Championships for catch wrestling August 18th. And I'm actually going to stay in the UK after Bloodsport, take a little bit of a vacation, well, of sorts, and then I will be meeting up with my team in Wigan, and then helping them and myself to get on the mats.
Yeah, I saw your posts about ACUA. It is getting through to me, even if the engagement's not there. Because I interviewed Cody a few times, and I get on well with Cody, so I'm very excited to see him as part of that team.
Yeah, he's dynamite, and I think he's going to do fantastic. There'll be no walkovers in his weight division, as if you can ever count on such a thing. But he's very, very talented, very tough, and I expect him to really show a great performance out there on the mats.
We've touched on Wigan, so and obviously the reason that event is in Wigan is the Stake Pit, obviously the lineage that Catch has in the UK. So following on from that, I guess After running several Bloodsport events in the US, you ran Japan now as well. How important, given that lineage, was it for you to be able to make the UK at home for Bloodsport as well?
Um, I want to take this to as many places as possible, but you're right, in that there's an extra element to bringing it to England, where MMA has really been on the rise in the UK in general and in England specifically. But catch wrestling still, while it is growing, and the snake pit has been huge on that. Still, still not really anywhere where it used to be, and our gains are always quite small in comparison to, say, other combat sports at times. I mean, to the point where I remember coming across some gal was doing wrestling in a jiu-jitsu class, and I'm like, oh, okay, and talking about how much she enjoyed it. And I see, oh, well, she's based in the UK. Because look, if any of this stuff comes across my Instagram reels or whatever, if I think it's a person who still wants to compete, I'm always looking, are they in the US, so I can try and get them to compete in our tournaments.
Yeah.
But I see that they were UK based. All right, boom. I say, hey, you should check these out. They run a British championship. The Worlds comes around every October, end of September. It's fantastic. And they're just like, oh, wow, I'd never heard of this, so on and so forth. And then it was, man, it's a shame they're not closer. And I'm just like, oh, my God. That country couldn't be any smaller in comparison to the United States. And I'm like, you have public transportation you can just jump on a damn train, travel through gorgeous green rolling hills and land and whatever, and there you are for a very minimal amount of money. Whereas people in the US often have to drive tens of hours or fly or whatever just to get over to Southern California to come and compete. That's something that's very strange to me. And it's not the first I'd actually heard of that, about people in the UK being like, oh, well, that's too far. It's like, what do you mean too far? Like, no country even within the UK is literally too far. You can fricking get on a jet for like $60 and you're there. It's insane. So I don't want to hear it. So we gotta work on that.
Yeah, that's actually one thing I noticed when I've been in the US with my family. They were like, "Oh, let's go to the shop. It's an hour and a half away." I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
an hour and a half drive in the UK is like a big deal. But they were like, "Oh,
Yeah.
we'll
Well,
just go to a shop. Oh, we'll go out and eat, and it's 2 hours away." Like, that's not how we are here. We are not used to those long drives. Or 2 hours,
well,
not a long drive. I'm sure you'll say.
it isn't. And our other weird idiosyncrasy with us out here is if you live in LA and someone goes, yeah, I'm just trying to get you the best image here possible. If you live in LA and you're telling someone, oh, hey, there's this thing going down in downtown, which is, let's say 30 minutes away for you. Nope. It's like now everybody locks into their little neighborhoods and they don't go anywhere. Look, if you're on the other side of the 405, on the west side of it, like, no one's coming east. It's just not happening.
We obviously touched on the snake pit there, so I guess following on from that, I'll kick us off with talking about Roy Wood, obviously a legendary coach of the snake pit. You're going to be honoring him at the show, and I know that's something you like to do. You obviously had some legends at the I think it was the WrestleMania week show you guys did.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean to you that Roy Wood is going to be in attendance at the show? And obviously you have a couple of snake pit guys competing as well.
Yes. I think the real honor is that I have the ability to give the recognition to Roy, more so than just him being available to be here. That I have a platform, I guess, as people love to say these days, that I can give that honor back, but also the recognition of who these people are, so other people can go and look into that. Because it's not a zero-sum thing where, okay, I found out who Roy Wood is, okay, that's it. Someone like Roy is a catalyst for so many other things, like a lot of people are, like Billy Riley was before him, or Billy Robinson and Gotch have been to others. You don't just learn about them and then that's just it. by learning about them, it'll take you to other places. It increases not just your knowledge of that person, but of the thing that they're associated with and attached to. That being like the snake bit is attached to Roy as one of the very few remaining people that was ever there in the original days. Well, the snake bit, again, that's another catalyst. So these things just lead you down other pathways throughout history of the thing that I'm assuming that you're into, right? Either combat sports or professional wrestling, either or. And or even within that combat sports label, amateur wrestling, because Roy actually spent quite a bit of time developing amateurs for decades, because pro wrestling just didn't really have the pull anymore at a point, and guys weren't coming to him to learn how to shoot as catch guys. He was just training people to be amateur wrestlers, and that's how I first found out about him, tracing it back actually from Tatsumi Fujinami. You know, I'm like, well, who's this guy? Who are these guys on this tradition show? I've never, you know, this is interesting. Aspel Wrestling Club? Yeah. And, you know, for me, that took me down a pathway that opened up other things. And I do the same for other people. But all it takes is just to get them in front of someone, and it sparks some curiosity. Well, why is this guy getting an award? Well, they say he's actually quite important. He's done some things. Well, perhaps I'll go and take a look.
That's almost the beauty of the fact that, and we haven't touched on it yet, but this show is in collaboration with Progress. There's a Progress show in the afternoon and then Bloodsport in the evening. There's going to be fans in the building who are there for the Progress show who aren't as familiar as Catch as certainly you are, or even I am, or other people like us who are involved in this world. So they're going to be introduced to these new people as well.
Yes, exactly. And the common denominator is it's all fighting of a sort, right? It's all combat sports of a sort. Like I am very fond of saying, pro wrestling and MMA, shooting and working is one side of the same coin. And it doesn't matter if you are an MMA fan or a shoot style fan or whatever. If you come from that Progress show and you stay and watch what we're doing in Bloodsport, it is pure raw professional wrestling, and you're going to get your money's worth and then some. And one of the benefits about this show is that, let's say you've seen Chris Ridgway a bunch of times, you've seen Mark True, you've seen Lou Nixon and Brett Semtek, the BTT tag team, you've seen that. You've seen these guys in other shows. You've seen Chris Bungard in pro wrestling even, or you'd seen Hedy Karui or Kev Lloyd or any of these guys, but you've never seen them in this. And it sounds like a trite marketing ploy, but it isn't. It really isn't. What the structure of this show, myself being attached and being helping with how these matches are put together, not just in booking them, but being the agent on the day and producer, but just everything about what this show does in terms of how it restricts you, but also how it opens up and gives you freedom in places that you wouldn't have it otherwise. You won't see the same match. You will not see a Chris Ridgway in this ring that you saw somebody else, somewhere else. It's just not happening. And if Chris had ever wrestled Mark True before, it won't be the same match again. Nothing about these wrestlers is the same as you know them. So, you know, get that idea out of your head if you haven't any trepidation, or, you know, hey, I'm sure there's going to be somebody out there, because everybody loves to make a statement, talking about how, oh, who cares about this guy or that guy, or, oh, I've seen that match before. Like, no, you haven't. You don't know anything. You just don't know. You don't even know what you don't know at this point.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring up that Ridgway and Mark II match, because they're the two independent guys on the show that I'm the most familiar with. And like when obviously you're thinking of guys who can do Bloodsport, those two weren't even on my radar. But then you announced them, and then I'm like, that made so much sense. And I'm very excited for that match to see what they can do specifically in this format.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, that's another thing that I love about Bloodsport, is introducing people to a different side or a different version of someone you think you already have pegged. I mean, a great example of that is Natty Neidhart. And these are things I always knew, but, you know, I have a little bit of an inside track of working with her and the family itself for so long. So what I saw in the ring, I'm like, yeah, duh. But everybody else is like, whoa, where is this? Who is this? I can't believe this. You know, you just don't know about all these wrestlers. I mean, a lot of them, maybe not as many as I'd like, because it'd be a lot easier to book these things. But there's a lot of folks out there that they have a side to them. They're putting the work in, maybe even silently. You don't know that they've been training BJJ and kickboxing or amateur wrestling, or they've been doing all this work on the side the whole time, but they're not really employing a style that is showing you that that's a part of it, right? They're still working a very, very, very pro style, maybe very WWE style, but something where you don't see people hitting double legs to arm bars, but that doesn't mean they don't know how to do them.
Yeah. I mean, you saying that, a couple of names popped into my head of people that are on the British scene right now who have legitimate backgrounds, but they don't really use them in the ring. And like, that maybe they're people that would be great for Bloodsport because they could show that and it would help bring that out of them. And they're not people that you would else, but maybe down the line. I do want to touch on this though, because obviously you are curating these shows, you are booking these shows. How difficult has it been for you trying to do a show where the talent on the show is so specific in the UK on a scene that you're not as familiar with compared to in the US or Japan?
It has been quite difficult. There's always the issue of finding the athletes, and with this being a show, the production is different on this one, and the expenditures and what we can and can't do, and who is and isn't available. That always is a big effect. And for this show, we really wanted to stick with UK-based talent or even Europe-based talent. But one issue for us on booking this was WXW is running almost the same weekend, and that's there was so much talent that wasn't available, like Axel Wolf, among others. So that it reduces the pool down. The other thing was trying to get as familiar with the UK pro wrestling scene as possible. I already had like a good handful of solid wrestlers to work from right away. But then finding the right opponents and expanding that can become quite difficult. Although the greatest difficulty in terms of the booking side of things was for women. Like using LLM, AI language models, and just my own personal poking around and research. There's like hardly, if not zero, women in the UK that have combat sports backgrounds or train or anything that is notable in terms of that in UK pro wrestling. And even AI, the best it could do was come up with people that are either already booked somewhere else in a big contract in a company that not necessarily gettable, or they're all retired. Like it just doesn't exist. So trying to put together a women's match on this card was like next to impossible. And I know the argument will be like, well, you could just book this one or that. Yeah. No, I can't actually. I can't book them if I don't have faith that they get it and can deliver and know what it's like to truly be able to execute these types of moves and to have this approach towards a match. And that's not to be mean to anybody or to be insulting. It's none of that. It's just that this isn't a given. Just because you can run the ropes and bump and do the international, that doesn't mean you can do Bloodsport. And, that's always a challenge, be it the men or the women. But there's just always so much of a smaller pool of women pro wrestlers in general. And then from that, those with a combat sports background is far, 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 far less. And a lot of that has to go with the way people are being trained and how companies are finding the talent and how they're prepping them and preparing them and what they need out of them. And to be honest, like combat sports doesn't even play into it, even though I think honestly, it should be a fundamental background to your professional wrestling training, even if you're not going to be a fighter. But I think it goes a long way into giving you the physical assets to potentially become a professional wrestler. But, I'm like one of very few voices that really takes that approach to it. And with that, most of the women in pro wrestling, let alone all the men, they don't need any of it, so they don't bother. I get it. But it makes it hard when you run something like Bloodsport and you want to fill that talent, and you run into these problems with the men's side. It's just that there's a broader pool it's just numbers. It's a numbers game. The other thing, though, that has been really frustrating is trying to get a read on what the UK fan base is like. And there's a few things I've come into that were quite shocking, not expected. But I hope that those that are going to show up to this realize that these athletes are given an opportunity here with Bloodsport to not just go and perform in the ring, but to do that, like we spoke of earlier, and show a different side of themselves and to bring a new level of intensity to who they are. And I really hope that everyone within that UK-based group, and this isn't to discount those on the international side, but basically, I want these wrestlers to now get a kind of a push, a bump in a way from the way that the fan base sees them by doing Bloodsport, and hopefully drawing in people that are now more interested in these guys as individuals, as wrestlers, but also into the style of what we're doing too.
Yeah, and like you say, I've seen some of the comments from the fan base as well. Generally along the lines of they want some more bigger stars.
But it's really disappointing to think like I am not. Josh Barnett's Bloodsport is not like it's not just a vehicle to book WWE talent. I mean, when that happens, it happens, and I book them not because they're WWE. I book them because they're good. And if they're not able to do what we need, then I'm not using them. And at first in the States, a lot of people were like, "Oh my God, this is incredible! This is crazy!" And then they're like, "Oh, there's too many of them. You're just a Fed guy now." I'm like, "What are you talking? I'm a wrestler guy first. If you don't like the WWE, well, I'm not telling you that you need to. I mean, that's up to you. You choose with your dollar. But you telling me that like you're gonna tell me that the War Raiders suck? Like they're just shit people that shouldn't belong in a ring, and because they're in the WWE, you can't like them, especially given a chance to go show that they can fight in Bloodsport. Now screw them, or Charlie Dempsey and Carmen Petrovich. Oh, you're in NXT. That spot should go to somebody else. Who should it go to, and why? What's the reason? Like, those two suck because they got picked up. What is it? I mean, no, great for them, but also great for us that they want to do this. Like, that's the other thing. No one's showing up in this ring that doesn't want to be there, and that includes people who make shit tons of money, who are not going to get anywhere near the financial incentives by doing my show. But they come to me and say, "I really want to do it. Please, you have a spot. I'm gonna," and that means I have to really do what I can to give the best ring available for these wrestlers to come out there, and I don't care where they're coming from. I just want them in the ring. If you can deliver, if you can do it, yeah, come out. And it's not so much that it hurts my feelings by any way, but when I see, I don't know what you would call the UK wrestling scene fans crap on their own homegrown people, that kind of, I feel bad for them, because what are you going to have if you don't have these folks from your own country, your own assemblage of countries, out there doing their thing? Where are you going to get them from? If you don't have them, then you don't have promotions. And if you don't have promotions, what else do you have? You got nothing.
Yeah, if there's no promotions, you're not going to have Natty come over and do a spot just to be a big name on a show, But I mean, for you, it's got to be.
Yeah. You're not going to have the talent to be developed out of it either. You don't get, if you guys like Pete Dunne, if there's nowhere to wrestle, and if you don't show up to watch him, where does he come from? Where does Chris Ridgway come from? Where does Brett Semtex come from? Like, where does Oli Thompson transition from strongman and MMA and everything else to then doing pro wrestling? Where does that come from? It doesn't,
I'm glad you mentioned Oli there because I want to obviously touch on that. You mentioned a few hours ago, or you announced a few hours ago that he would be your opponent in Bloodsport this time out. Obviously, strongman turned MMA. Now he's done a little bit of pro wrestling, but not too much. But obviously, he's fought in the UFC. He was former IGF champion. Really, a guy that's been everywhere and done so much. A real like a pioneer and a legend of UK MMA. I mean, I spoke to Oli a few days ago. So anyone watching this, go check that one out when you're done watching this one with Josh. But Oli is someone that immediately jumped out to me when you announced him as being like, oh, that's an interesting one. He kind of gave me the story about how he ended up on the show. But how soon in talking to Oli did you know that this was the match that you wanted for this show?
As I was putting this thing together, it just was always hanging in the back of my mind that that was a great possibility because he's exactly the kind of opponent I would look for. It's not about where he's fought necessarily. It's about he's a guy who's fought everywhere. He's won titles. He's had ups. He's had downs. He's been through it all. And he was England's strongest man, competed in the world's strongest man competition, and all these laundry list of things. It shows like, okay, this guy is a total package. He's a full-on heavyweight who can knock you out, throw you out of the ring, outbench you, outsquat you. I mean, okay, I want that guy. That's the guy. And as things started whittling down and you're looking at who you got in front of you, it's just like, okay, who am I gonna match up with? Well, that's the challenge right there. Like that's the guy, you know, who's gonna put you on your head, tear your arm off, and beat you with it, and just do laps with the St. George Cross flag, over the top of you, lying there trying to stop the bleeding. That's what I'm looking for. And at the same thing, Ollie's seen me fight plenty, so he knows what kind of viciousness I'm going to bring. And if he's not willing to do as I described, then he knows it's going to be a very short and unpleasant night. But I don't think that's his approach. I think he's going to be coming serious as a heart attack.
Well, yeah, well, when I spoke to him a few days ago, he told me he wanted the most legitimate guy possible, and I'd say he's got him in the Warmaster.
I agree. I know that The Rock loves to call himself the final boss, but I guess I'm the final boss of Bloodsport.
Of course, Oli, he was the final, Inoki Genome Federation heavyweight champion. If with a win here, are you the unofficial Inoki Genome Federation champion?
I suppose, but then with a win here, he's the unofficial open weight king of pancreas, I guess. So at the end of the day, we just got to get in that ring, and we'll see who shows up on that night for both of us. But I know the preparation's being done, and there is no lack for violent intent on either side.
Of course. I was talking to Ollie. He doesn't know where that belt is. He wasn't allowed to keep it. Is it with the Inoki family? Do you have any intel?
It's probably. I can think of a few people who probably have a hold on that belt. But yeah, if they're in Japan when they build these incredibly extravagant belts, they're not letting you have them. I mean,
That's a ridiculous belt.
No, you're not getting that one.
I imagine that the second Ollie walks backstage, I don't know, Simon or whoever is like, nope.
I mean, yeah, it's
probably Antonio.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we talked a little bit about the WWE involvement in your shows there. So many, the Creed brothers, Pete Dunne, Natalia, the War Raiders. Is there anyone that, and you don't need to answer this if you don't want, because it might be something that's already in the works. Is there anyone that you haven't been able to use yet, where you're like, they would be a perfect fit? Because for me, the one that jumps out is Tara Stock, right?
Oh yeah, well, I haven't had a chance to communicate with Tamra, although she has spent some time with Shayna Baszler in training. I think she'd be fantastic. She's been doing some stuff, not in the ring together per se, but with Tavian Heights, D'Angelo Hancock, and I think the world of him. Like D'Angelo Hancock's fan-fucking-tastic. Great, great Greco guy. Did a great job in his Bloodsport debut. And you know, I'm pretty sure they must have communicated about this. So maybe that's sitting in the back of her mind as something she'd like to do. But there have been plenty of talent that I've yet to been able to get into Bloodsport. But look, ultimately, they got to want to do it. And even if they're capable of it, that doesn't necessarily mean that they want to. And at the same time, WWE is a very, very, very busy place. And they're working on so many different shows and events in advance that they themselves can't be entirely sure of who would be available to work my show or any show really, sometimes until the last second. And you know, they don't have a responsibility to make sure talent's available for me. I just always really appreciate it when I can get my hands on some of these particular wrestlers, not because they're WWE people, but because I know that they're good and I just want them, which is why they're in the WWE as well.
Of course. You've done a lot of shows in the US now. You've run Sumo Hall for your debut in Japan. Now in the UK. What does the next step look like for Bloodsport in your mind?
I don't know exactly. I think building towards next WrestleMania week is going to be something we got to start on here soon. Honestly,
will that be the next show after London?
That's what I'm planning, anyways.
Yeah.
I don't know that anything else would pop up in between now and then, but if Bloodsport's going to become something that can go and continue to grow into its next stage and its next phase, I think we've probably gone as far as we can go as we're operating at the moment. So some things are going to have to happen so that we can create the structure to take it even, whatever that next step is going to look like. I have some ideas in my head, but until you start actually putting the boots on the ground and building the things and seeing how they go in real life, you don't know exactly. You can game out as much as you can think of. You can try to theorize, and that's helpful. Don't get me wrong. It's a nice way to try and problem solve before the problems have ever even happened. But it's once things are in motion, and you learn what the nitty gritty is and what's going to need to be done. And honestly, I'm looking forward to that because that means we're moving forward. We're creating the potential for growth, and that's what I want.
Of course, I am conscious of taking too much of your time, but I do want to talk about some MMA. Going back in time, you made your debut in '97, heavyweight champion 2002 in the UFC. Back then, would you have been able to predict what MMA has grown to be now?
Well, in terms of its popularity, I think I could have seen that. Like, that's something I could have envisioned. The way it has structured itself, that I didn't necessarily see. I didn't see it becoming more restrictive in terms of how it was going to be, how the game itself was going to be played, the environments, that so many of the promotions were going to fail for a lot of reasons. You'd look at it and you go, well, yeah, that's simple. That, of course you didn't make it. Duh. Like, you can't have that much in terms of expenditure and that little in terms of return. It's just not going to work. And the fact that Japan has really dropped in terms of being a premier MMA market. I'm glad that it's still kicking along there, and Ryzen's an amazing show. Probably my most favorite show to watch, to be honest. But it doesn't happen. It happens with some frequency that I'm happy about for the most part. But like, the heavyweights aren't there. Some of the elements of that earlier Japanese MMA scene aren't quite there. And then the underlying infrastructure behind all the other organizations, like those second tier ones, those aren't really there anymore. And that makes an impact on your ability to build stars up from another organization and transfer over into what you're doing there, and then build it even bigger. And then the lack of a lot of American and international talent going over there because of things having to do with the economy and what have you. And so some of this stuff, I never really saw Japan as not being one of the leaders on the forefront on a regular basis. But the UFC has really done a fantastic job of consolidating not only the market in terms of the athletes themselves and making themselves the premier place to be, but also in being so ahead of the curve on doing the media rights stuff that seems to be necessary for whatever your IP is. It's a whole different environment these days. And with the understanding that everything has to move to some sort of a digital service somehow, and then being in, it's not exactly the ground level with streaming, but as far as I'm concerned, it's still new enough that like they're getting in there and having the ability to get those billion-dollar deals and do this and do that. I'm just like, wow, okay, this is just something I didn't foresee. And your number two is, I guess, the PFL, who I like their tournament formats, and I like it's not $1 million anymore, but even 500 grand is pretty substantial. But it's tough for them to get much traction in comparison to the UFC because the UFC's name is so dominating. But to me, it just reminds me of how everything becomes that way. Like you can buy cotton swabs all day, but everyone's going to call them a Q-tip, because once you become that market name leader, people don't want to be pedantically specific. They're just going to call it and go to what they know. They're not going to care about, oh, well, there's a new one. Well, I've already got this. I'm not going to spread myself out across multiple things here. So unfortunately, that's, I think, more of a symptom of current climates in terms of culture. But we'll see what happens. It's the ability for anybody to start something has never been better, but what it costs to do so and your ability to sustain yourself seems even more difficult than it's ever been. So, who knows? And I know Europe, though, isn't hurting for MMA. Cage Warriors still doing fantastic. Although, again, look at the UK. Look at all those organizations that just disappeared that used to exist. But then you got Octagon and KSW, and now Aries. So the rest of continental Europe is KSW has been doing great stuff for a long time, huge. But it's funny because that European market, it's like it doesn't exist to all of us over here in the States.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and like you mentioned Ryzen at the start of that answer as well. They've had a great couple years, but it's still so regionalized where obviously in the past that wasn't the case with Pride.
Yeah, it is. And I hate to see it, but whatever is necessary to keep things moving, and in time, perhaps as long as they can keep going forward, Rising can find a gap to exploit, open up, and then have more of an international presence. It would be great to see. And honestly, one of the things I loved so much about MMA was that the rules could be different wherever you went, that there could be one-night tournaments, or this place has got soccer kicks and headbutts, but this place doesn't, or let's say it's rings rules for now. It's like really, really, really sporting in terms of how it's put together. I love that. I liked it a lot. And to see MMA almost strangled into the unified rule system, it's just been heartbreaking.
There's the struggles that all the other organizations have had that you mentioned there. That's kind of what makes this Phil Davis lawsuit very interesting, right? Because if anything comes of that, who knows what the future holds?
It's true. And I know, as much as everyone loves to hate the market leader, whoever they may be, I'm not going to say that the UFC has done everything in good faith at all times. I think even in the best of scenarios, it can be difficult to not try to slaughter your competition in some ways when you get the chance. But I think that if done correctly, I think that there's a way in which the fighters can get the money that they're deserved through their drawing power, which is the big thing to me. and the UFC still be a killer, still make all the money that they need to make, and everyone can be happy. But it's going to be difficult. It's going to have to take a probably being forced. Not because the UFC is unique in this. I'm not trying to single them out. They just happen to be the one at the top of the mountain peak. But even when people could do something different, where they could make a change that will involve them making or getting less. They're not relinquishing power per se, but they're giving more of where that capital. They just don't. They won't. And some of that could be, corporate culture of maximizing shareholder value. Yes, I get that. But I think that there's just more important things in the world than earning money. Because to me, money is just a tool to facilitate action in the world. And it can be great for security for your own self and yours and the people around you. But if you want to run a business and do stuff, I mean, when you become UFC level, it's not long before you have enough money that you're totally secure. But now what am I going to do with that cash other than how can I use it to make what I do better, make the thing that I have reach more people, be more fun, be more entertaining. And I know that there's ways at which you can maximize your capital return through licensing, controlling your IP and media rights. And I get all that, but you could do all of that and you can run through all these systems. And honestly, sometimes I feel like it becomes more about the mechanics and the material element of doing that than it is about the, I guess you could call it, spiritual element of creating the atmosphere and the aesthetics and the moment for these fighters, which to me can't ever be purchased. So, it's a struggle that's always going to occur, no matter what you do. But yeah, this Phil Davis lawsuit, it's just going to take lawsuits. And even if it isn't anything about acrimony, it's just, if things have to change, it's the only way to change it, just because we as humans, we just won't do it. Even if it could make things better, a lot of times it's just too hard for us to see far enough ahead to realize that, like, you're not really at stake of really losing anything. And that is a concern, because there's always the worry that whatever you do, whatever you give up, or whatever you may trade away could be something very important towards your power in this position. And if you no longer have enough power to control your environment and put together the things you need to do and make the calls and the commands that you need to make, then maybe somebody that gets exploited, and somebody who doesn't relinquish some of that opportunity of power then uses it against you and crushes you. It's simple in some ways and more complex in others.
Yeah. Hypothetically, 19-year-old Josh Barnett, who stepped into the UFC, won the title a few years later. He's coming in to this era of MMA. What do you think you would need to do differently, and what would be similar? Because obviously the heavyweight division, not a young man's division now.
Similar would be the well-rounded, complete approach. Differently, put a heavier emphasis on wrestling, but changing the ground game approach, especially on bottom. Working and gaming against or with the system of the unified rules that's in place, and maximizing the amount of leverage that fighter could have in terms of within the UFC to get the best deals and best opportunities as possible. Because that would be like the biggest way to increase your name value, but also your pocketbook. So that's the way I'd go about it. And I would say that, like, that kid from like 19 to 24 or 25 would still be a UFC heavyweight champion. He would still be beating all of them.
I mean, it's an old man's game at heavyweight now, right? We think of Aspinall as a young guy, and he's like in his 30s.
My favorite heavyweight, yeah. see. That would be the guy that would be a huge task, but I still believe young Josh would be able to beat him. But old Josh likes his approach and wants to see him use more of his grappling whenever possible too, if need be. Obviously, if you're getting the work done with your hands and your feet, great. But when the opportunity comes that you can add a little trip, a little double, a little wall takedown, something, and just grind these guys in the dust, let them put their hands out where they shouldn't be. You know, I love seeing it. I also really like Cyril Gahn. I love his approach. The fact he'll drop on a leg, it's fun to see. And although it's frustrating when you see him somehow decide in his head that he's not gonna commit enough of like a serious threat shot because he's worried about the response, and then he holds himself back. When Gahn's best when he's just flowing and moving, working behind his jab and pumping out those body kicks and such, and keeping those threats legitimate. Like threats in terms of not like, oh, I'm going to poke you, but oh shit, you might get knocked out on this one.
So how do you think that fight goes then?
I think Aspinall takes it, but I love that fight. But what I really would love to see is like a one-night tournament with these heavyweights. You know, put them on different sides of the brackets and see how they go. And you know, I think I'd like to see them, Aspinall and Gahn, come out there, not just at their best, of course, but when they're fighting, I want them to not be like, okay, I need to win this round by a 10-9, and then I'll 10-9 this one, and then I'll always make sure I score a takedown at the last. I don't want that. I don't want to see them game the rule set. I want to see them just go out there and fight to their best abilities and let their skills fly. And I think that would be so awesome. And I don't care who gets took or if it goes, you know, if someone was to get finished. No, there would be zero diminishing of how much I like them. You know, in fact, it would probably only increase.
Of course. That's a big heavyweight fight. One big heavyweight fight we never got to see, despite the two of you spending a lot of time in organizations together. Yourself and Fedor. Many people's 1 and 2 at the time. Pride tried to make it happen. Affliction tried to make it happen. Unfortunately,
the thing with the reason why it didn't work out in Affliction was because Affliction had killed themselves even before that event had even gotten halfway there. As I was to understand things, and I think people, when they want to like slander me about Affliction, it's like they don't understand. Like Affliction doesn't exist without me. Like that show doesn't even fucking exist if I don't exist. If I wasn't, you know, as tight and on the inside and friends with those people, because the original concept was my concept, and it wasn't to do something like that. It was something much smaller, and then things steamrolled and it went that direction. And you know, half of the first fucking card, I booked it. So, you know, the reason it didn't happen is because Affliction, when I told them what they should be paying people and then what they did pay people, I was like, oh, this is unsustainable. And then I got pushed out, and then they spent all their cash.
Do you feel that kind of unfairly gets leveled on that fight though?
Well, lots of things are unfairly, but if people want to be able to give the middle finger and slander and yell and blame people for everything. They want to shit talk, or they want to either want to shit talk or they want to like over the top like praise or validate something or someone. There is no in between. There's no nuance. There's no considerations. It's nothing. And so I just don't. I'm not looking for it, and I don't care. And I'm not saying that everything in the world is so utterly complex and this huge scale of gray all the time. But in terms of things like running a fight promotion, it gets incredibly complex and complicated, and all kinds of shit's going down. And then when you're a deliberate and purposeful competitor to the biggest one in the world, the UFC at the time, and there is actual legitimate animosity between both sides. I mean, okay, you know, another reason that killed Affliction, I said, do not run Vegas. Do not bother you don't need to go to Vegas. most all the people that go out to events in Vegas are coming from Southern California anyways, and it's a really short drive. Let's take over SoCal. Start with that. We can move on a few other places, but let's just stay the hell out of Vegas. Affliction 2, Thomas and Mack Center. Disaster. Absolute disaster. Couldn't get any advertising going in Vegas. Couldn't get a ticket to. It was a complete shit show. And then the whole thing got canceled. Nobody remembers that. And then Roy Nelson fought Arlovsky on Strikeforce, or might have actually, I think it was even World Series of Fighting, or no, not that. Sorry, it was either Strikeforce or it was Elite XC. Either way, it got the card itself. That bout got moved to a different card, and Affliction paid for it. But you know, having to cancel an entire event, it's not like you got your money back for renting the venue, or it was just a huge catastrophe. And the thing was, I said so. I said, don't do it. But when you don't listen to me in this regard, this is what happens. Your company goes to shit. But, you know, Affliction's problems were by their own making. You know, there were people there that thought they had better ideas. They were smarter. They were whatever. And they wanted to push their ways in and bring in their buddies and do different stuff. And, you know, as soon as all those foxes got in that hen house, they tore it up and ruined it.
It goes to what we were saying earlier, but still to this day, no one's put as much like worry. Maybe not worry is not the right word, but Dana's never cared about a number 2 as much as Affliction. Since even with the 2 shows, no one even close.
Well, we could have been a legitimate threat. But, you know, that's a funny to put it that way. It's like, nah, it's not like the UFC was going to ever go away. It was, if we could have also had a foothold in MMA with Affliction, it just would have created competition, which would have been good for the fighters. And honestly, I think it would have been good for the companies too. It would have allowed a lot of things to maybe get further along than they had, faster than as they have to this point. But it would have been nice to have a solid competitor that was a different show altogether, that didn't look like just the same thing, but with a different name. And we had access to different kinds of backers and sponsors and things. We're just a different kind of company. So who knows what would have came of it. It would have been nice, but it just wasn't meant to be. And to be honest, you know, it fell the wayside for essentially the same reasons why practically every competitor, minus a couple, did. Why they didn't work out. It's not because the UFC killed them. They killed themselves.
So yourself and Fedor doesn't happen in Pride, doesn't happen in Affliction. You were both in Bellator at the same time. Obviously, you never ended up fighting for Bellator, but you were there for a bit. Was that ever a possibility over there?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I'm not sure. And with Pride, it seemed like something they didn't really want to put together. So I don't know. You know, and then shortly after that, they collapsed. Not too long after that, but I had spoken to them about fighting him plenty of times, and they're like, no. All right, you know, I built my position, and once I finally got within striking distance, it just wasn't meant to be.
Do you think if that fight happened and you got that win over Fedor, you would have been back in the UFC sooner?
I don't know, because honestly, at that time, without knowledge of it laying out the way it did, or I should say foreknowledge, I would have tried to stay in Japan. I figured that would have been my best market to be a part of, and honestly, it's where I wanted to be. I didn't try to get back to the UFC. It's just everywhere I went, I kept running into these scenarios, and then the UFC being the only company really with the capital and the desire to go out there and buy up these contracts and do what I mean, that's the thing, you know, they go in there on a fire sale and everyone says the UFC killed no, they didn't kill the market. You blew it. You guys blew it yourselves, and then you sat there and ran a fucking yard sale. So why wouldn't the UFC show up? I mean, you're not making their job difficult for them. And I would have tried to have stayed in Japan, to be perfectly honest. And even then, okay, Pride collapsed. The UFC could have bought my deal, but Pride owed me money, a lot of money, because they pulled a switcheroo on a contract signing. And we had signed a deal. We negotiated it. We signed it. We did it all over email. And then, like 2 days before fighting Alex Emelianenko, they're like, "Oh, could you just sign one in person?" Yeah, sure. We flipped through the looks the same for the most part, but no, they had made a few tiny little changes and fucked me over and stole money out of my pocket. I told the UFC was familiar with this. I had made this complaint. I was on a whole conference call, and I said, "Look, you can't give me half. You guys got to pay me all of it. Otherwise, you can't have my contract." And so the UFC's like, "Well, we're not going to do that." And Pride says, "We're not going to do that." I said, "Well, then fuck all of you." That was my thing at the time. And it was like, my intention wasn't to go there anyways. And I ended up fighting in Strikeforce, and then Strikeforce failed. Okay. All right, then. I guess
No other option.
I'm going to the UFC because there's nowhere else to go.
Yeah. We obviously mentioned you didn't get that fight in Bellator. A couple other places I want to ask about where you haven't fought. Someone you worked with very early in your career, all the way back to AMC Pancration, Matt Hume. Did he ever try to bring you to one?
Oh, no, not at all.
Would you have had interest in that at that point, or?
I spoke with Chatri at one point after Strikeforce, but they run the MMA stuff so infrequently that
Yeah.
I had some reserved approach towards that, and ultimately I just decided I didn't think that was the best place for me to be.
And another big MMA story this year, which eventually became a non-story, GFL. I spoke to Oli about this. He was available to be drafted. He wasn't drafted in the end. Did they contact you about being a part of this?
Oh yeah, they were reaching out to me through various avenues, different people. At the end of the day, I'm just like, well, I'm not really that interested in it. But look, if whatever I'm doing, you have to pay me in advance on a camp, or I'm not going into camp to go fight for anybody. Like, you're gonna give me a non-refundable advance, which is something I have done for years. And I go, or there's nothing. Oh, they'll never do that. And I go, well, I guess I'm not. There's no possibility of me fighting for you, because I'm not gonna put aside everything else I'm working on so that I can go into a camp and train to go and fight for your show for no money. It's just not happening.
Yeah. Again, are you surprised at how that turned out? You mentioned a big theme of this interview has been talking about secondary MMA organizations eventually failing. Are you surprised about GFL not getting off the ground, or not really?
Not really. I'm more surprised they decided to go with that horrible AI art. It's the worst thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, of course. Obviously, Oli comes from the IGF. We talked about Fedor then as well. One man who blended MMA and pro wrestling in the 90s was Volkan, doing his thing out in rings in the 90s. How do you think him and his style would have translated to the early UFCs if he went that route?
He'd have been a terror. He's a big guy, super calm, super experienced, and yeah, he would have been a handful. He would have beat Hoist for sure, I believe. Not because Hoist sucks. That's not what I'm saying. I just think that his approach, his craftiness. I mean, I could see Hoist maybe getting a gi choke, but it just would have been really tough to deal with Volk. And he's big, taller.
Yeah.
It would have been rough. There are some guys there that could have given him some pretty hard fights, but I think he definitely could have been one of those ones to have been a UFC tournament champion back in the day, for sure. And I have just so much respect for Volkan. He's one of my absolute favorites of all time.
Do you think there was ever any possibility of him, Tamura, those guys ever going to the UFC, or were they just comfortable doing their thing in rings?
No, I think Rings had it all set for them. Rings was a fairly well-backed organization, and they weren't starving or hurting for money. and they had an international network. I think perhaps people forget, even those that are big fans of pro wrestling and shoot wrestling, but the concept of rings was that it was everybody was going to be linked together through the ring of combat all around the world. There would be rings everywhere, rings around the world, global rings to bring it all back to this place. That was the concept. And Maeda nailed it. His ability to talent scout is some of the greatest in all of modern combat sports. And I try to learn as much as I can from him, not just in that, but in many, many ways.
Of course, and I mean, similar to what you're doing these days. You look at that. You look at rings. There's some similarities there, especially with some of the matches you're putting together. Um, there was an interesting video that came out yesterday of someone I know you've worked with very closely, Ronda Rousey, hitting pads, saying her love for the sport is coming back. People are speculating. Do you see Ronda Rousey making a return to MMA?
Hard to say. She doesn't need the money, and from my knowledge, man, her life is going great. Her and Travis have great kids, a wonderful family, a great ranch. I love the Browsey Acres Wagyu that Travis is out there raising. I buy it, and I could see. I mean, I could see her back in the ring. I kind of felt like her last two fights, the preparation wasn't correct for Holly, and then Nunes, it just didn't seem like the same Rousey. Um, Nunes is a person you always got to be aware of and concerned with, especially early on. She has a lot of power. If she can be the aggressor, she's going to steamroller most girls. But if she runs into somebody that can give her aggression back, that's when you don't know what's going to happen. Either you're going to get into a dogfight or Nunes is going to peter out and quit. Because if you watch, when she loses, she quits and she gets finished, either through gassing out hard or just getting stuck in a bad spot. But when she's in the driver's seat, she just steamrollers girls.
It seems pro wrestling maybe not anymore for her, but I mean, with that video yesterday, you never know. But do you think pro wrestling's in the past?
No idea. If she wanted to do that, I'm sure she'd have no issue being able to get back into a ring wherever she wanted to be honest. Well, of course, the question would easily be the follow-up here is, what about Bloodsport? It's like, yeah, if she wanted to do Bloodsport, absolutely. Yeah. I think she'd do fantastic. And, Shayna Baszler is a free agent at the moment, and I think I could put together something with her and Shayna that would be leagues better than what they were doing in WWE together. But that's because I don't have to concern myself with the same kinds of things that the WWE does when they do a match, let alone a pay-per-view match. There are a lot of cooks in those kitchens, a lot of things on the line, and a lot of money involved, which makes things precarious at times. Whereas with what we do, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, here's your $5, your meal voucher, and I'll buy you your first drink. But yeah, you can do whatever the hell you want just about in this ring.
It feels like, and this is purely just speculation for me, that a Bloodsport match against Shayna to do it the right way is something that would interest her. Obviously, I'm not in her head. I can't say that for sure, but that's just my speculation. And Marina's killing it too. Throw her in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I just want to see people thrive. That's it. I want to see folks really hit their stride and take it as far as they can with what they're capable of doing. And if you get in Bloodsport and you don't leave that ring with people thinking higher of you and having more appreciation and more respect for what you are and what you do, then I've not set the ring properly for you. And I really feel like everyone that does Bloodsport leaves it with more credit than without. They're seen in a higher and a better light than they were before, which is important to me.
Yeah, I mean, and bringing it back to this Sunday, obviously Bloodsport, Electric Ballroom, right next to Camden Town Tube Station, very easy to get to in London. look down the camera, give us the hard sell. What can people? You've done it a bit there, but what can people expect? And from the show as a whole, and when yourself and Oli Thompson step into the mat, what can the people expect?
Look, we are the hardest hitting event in all of professional wrestling. No questions. That is an objective fact. Nobody is going to step to that challenge. And there's a reason for it. Because this ring gathers the best, the baddest, the meanest, whether you know their names or whether you don't. But if you watch them this Sunday, you're never going to forget. And stepping into the ring against me is going to be Oli Thompson. He's new to the world of professional wrestling, but he ain't new to kicking ass. Except I ain't going out there to give him a nice little canvas to paint the picture he wants. No. I'm going out there to give him the fight of his life. And at the end of the day, well, the only canvas that I can see of is the canvas of the Bloodsport mat being painted with Oli's blood. But if I don't approach it that way, then it would be a massive disrespect to Oli. So if I don't bring him everything I've got, like I said, he's going to disassemble me in front of everybody. It's one thing to go out there and get knocked out. It's another thing to be concerned that this grown man can draw and quarter you himself.
What a promo. What a promo. I'm very excited. Of course, tickets are still available for Sunday. It's a collab with Progress, and I know Progress have been crucial in making this happen in the UK as well. And Progress in the afternoon, Bloodsport in the evening. The show will be on Triller, as always, but not live. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. This was something I didn't know of early on, but the show will be taped, but it will be aired later on Triller. So when is later? I don't know. So if you want to see this, you need to really be there live. Don't be that person that just sits at home like, oh, no, it's not the same. Show up. It's not that expensive. It's in London, easy to get to. I know you guys can all get in the tube and get there, or take the Avanti West Coast or whatever it takes. Bring me my Welshman. Bring me my Irish, Northern or Republic. Come on, Scotsman. We've got we got at least 2 guys from Scotland on this card. So is it? Well, yeah, we're gonna have 2 guys from Scotland on this card. Come on out. Look, we have a Frenchman on the card. Come on over. There's a tunnel, for Christ's sakes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm about 3 hours from London. I'm definitely going to be there. I'm going to be there, so very excited. Yeah, like you say, you've run down the list of guys on this interview already, so I'm not going to make you do that again. But there's some great matchups. Obviously, yourself and Oli Thompson. We got Chris Ridgway and Mark True, and so many more still to be announced. So yeah.
Well, we've got only a couple more matches to announce yet, but we've also got Chris Bungard versus Lou Newton. We got James Farrell versus RPD, Ryan Davies. We have a Snake Pit Rules catch wrestling match that's going to be on this card. And I'll announce that hopefully as soon as possible. We have the award ceremony to the great Roy Wood. And we have, you already said Chris Ridgway and Mark True. Hedy Karui will be taking on Kevin Lloyd. Fantastic night.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very excited. Like I say, I'm going to be there. So yeah. And I was at that show in February at the GCW show when they announced it in the Electric Ballroom, and the crowd seemed very excited. So hopefully that excitement remains. It's a UK crowd. It's going to be electric in the Electric Ballroom. I can't wait. Yeah, I'm very excited. Hope it goes well for you, Josh. Thank you so much for taking the time today. Have a safe trip over and enjoy your time.
If only I could have gotten one of my all-time favorite Brits. Oh my God, Brian Blessed to do our ring announcing.
Yes,
but,
yes, that would have been perfect.
But we do have the lovely Tom Campbell, and he's going to do a great job.
Yeah, I saw that. He's great. I've seen him a ton of times. He's great.
Yeah, but it's not Brian Blessed. All I can think of is him screaming "Harry" from Blackadder 1. Yeah.
Well, that's something to aim for Bloodsport London too.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking the time today, Josh. It's been a real honor to talk to you. Yeah. Have a safe trip over to the UK. Enjoy your trip. You're staying for a long time, so enjoy your trip, and then yeah, enjoy Sunday as well.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be a hard fight, but this is what I live for. This is why I'm a Warmaster, and I love the UK. I've been around a good section of it, and I've just always been a big fan.